What's up, everybody, and welcome to the No BS Real Estate Show, a podcast that gives you an inside look on how to make smart financial decisions while adding value to your life. I'm Matty Miller with ERA Real Estate, alongside my co-host and real estate investor extraordinaire, Ryan Robbins. Whether you're a longtime investor or a first-time buyer, join us as we dig through the everyday bullshit of real estate. Ryan Robbins, it's been a long time, my man.
It has.
We apologize to the people.
We've been slacking.
I don't know who the people are, but you know what? One of these days, there's going to be a ton of listeners, but we are putting out good content, and that's all that matters. So today we are, we're debating an issue that's been kind of talked about by some really good thought leaders in our business or our world, the real estate investing world. Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone, some of those guys, and then recently covered, on the other side by, what's the gentleman's name that you met out in California?
Jared James.
So, kind of talking our perspective on, in the long run, is it better to buy a house or is it better to rent? Because there's been two philosophies brought to light in the world that we live in now. And I want to really, really reference the world we live in now, how much that's changed compared to, the quote unquote American dream, when our parents grew up or our grandparents, and how much different it was to manage your money and to buy a house and manage your monthly budget versus, what we have to deal with now, as I'm technically a quote unquote millennial. So it's different for me. I don't think like a millennial typically, in some aspects, maybe a little bit, but not too much. So where do you want to kick it off, my man? Or do you want to explain a little bit more about what we're talking about?
Yeah. So essentially kind of breaking down, if we're talking about Gary V and Grant Cardone, their perspective is home ownership is a bad idea. You shouldn't invest in a home for yourself. You should invest that money into things that are going to make you money, either other cash flowing properties, maybe single family rentals. Well, Grant Cardone will tell you don't buy anything under 16 or 24 units, something like that. But that's their outlook. Don't invest in a property, invest into businesses or other things that are going to make you money.
Yeah.
And that's essentially the gist of it.
And expand on that. And kind of the first thing is, okay, so let's just say that, and just hypothetical situation, the average American median income is like $40,000 a year. So after you're paying your bills, feeding your kids, doing all that stuff like that, I think the household median income is around like 45, and that may be even less. And I'm actually going to get those numbers just so we know.
But I was going to say, while you're looking that up, the kind of whole discussion that this is going to encompass, and we've kind of taken some notes on this, but essentially is looking at the net worth of an American over 65 and comparing renter's net worth versus a homeowner's net worth. And that's, again, the big argument here is, look, they're telling you that you shouldn't buy a home. You should take that money and invest it in real estate. Well, kind of facts prove otherwise. So that said, the average net worth of a homeowner right now over 65 is $319,200. And this is according to Tom Ferry, that study that he had done. And the average net worth of a renter over 65 is $6,700, $6,710 to be exact. So that's a difference of $312,490, almost 48 times that of a homeowner.
Pretty significant difference in what a homeowner's worth versus what a renter's worth. So, and again, we're talking about the average, and I think the point that we have to drill in here is what these guys are talking about is if you're a real estate mogul or a angel investor or whatever, that doesn't make sense for you to buy a house. Now, how many real estate moguls or angel investors do you know in your life? Personally.
Yeah.
Because the answer to me is zero.
Yeah.
So I know zero. I know a lot of normal people, though, that need to buy a house and have a place to live, that probably the biggest enemy for their budget and their actual personal household is probably themselves. And that's the biggest one, as Jared James said. And I'll let you talk on this topic, is the fact that basically buying a house acts as a kind of a safeguard against yourself and the consumerism and kind of the world that we live in now, which is, I got to buy the new car and I got to buy the new shoes and I got to buy the new whatever. Cause I'll tell you what, when I bought my first house, I didn't go out, I used to go out to, bars and restaurants and, 3, 4 nights a week because I was paying cheap rent. I could do whatever and I could go out and I could buy a new pair of shoes. And my new pairs of shoes I bought since I bought my new house? Like one, bro. I'm still wearing the same stuff. Okay. So it does change, it changes the way that you have to do it because, and not to mention that, the house that I bought, we were putting a lot of money into because we were fixing it up. But it's still an investment for the average person. And make no mistake, I'm an average guy just like you. We're not special people by any means. My dad was a freaking high school teacher and my mom owned a small business that made about 20 grand a year. So didn't come from anything special, but yeah. So, the way that they spin that is just the fact that, hey, if they have, Cardone's talking about, I don't buy anything less than 16 units. Well, how much does a 16 unit apartment building cost?
Correct. And that's what he's suggesting your average investor go out and buy. Don't buy anything else underneath that, So that's what they're promoting. And, almost to quote exactly what you were taking bits and pieces of, Jared had said, homeownership safeguards against our modern day consumerism that promotes lifestyle over financial freedom.
Correct. And exactly what I was explaining in layman's terms is that it does protect against that. It has to.
And the numbers prove. So if you're a renter keeping up with, again, the lifestyle, naturally it's not going to act as essentially a savings account. It's a forced savings. Homeownership is essentially a forced savings account over time.
Absolutely.
So,
and I'm somebody who's been through that, man. I rented for years in my 20s, and I was an idiot. I didn't, I wasn't getting into real estate that well, or I was in the business, but I wasn't learning about the business at the time. And I was a person that, basically spent all my money. I'm like, hey, my rent's paid. I got this. I can go on a vacation. I can go buy whatever I want to. And I look, 3-4 years down the road, and I'm like, man, I did not save a dime of that. And that's kind of the way it goes. And then, when you buy a house and some people would just call it flat out maturity, or the actually, the adult life cycle, would say, now that you're in your 30s, maybe it's time to save some money and, buy a house and settle down and, which is often, it's just fairly normal too. Right. So there's all sorts of different ways to go in that, but back to, the way those guys talk about it is, their audience is maybe probably 0.5% of the population in America. That's the audience that can do what they're saying that they should do. Right? Probably about right.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know how many people got $500,000 sitting around to invest in a 80 unit apartment complex.
Correct.
I don't know.
It's more of a, people. They take more, I guess our argument is they're taking more of an influencer type of role overall. And to that, it's more, as opposed to believing something just to believe it, or just because somebody said it. We're not trying to talk people into homeownership or out of homeownership. It's more so let's look at the facts overall and make a calculated decision based on true numbers, not based upon what somebody said.
See, that's where you're wrong, because I'm trying to talk people into homeownership. Most of the time, not always.
Correct.
There are situations where if you move to Jacksonville for a 3-year stint in the military, perfect example. Military people come here all the time and they go buy a house, and I'm like, that doesn't always make sense unless you buy it specifically for. I deal with a lot of people with rentals, and I deal with a lot of people who buy rentals on purpose, and I deal with a lot of people who buy rentals that we call them accidental landlords. And if they're an accidental landlord, they probably didn't look at the numbers versus a rental when they were going to leave that property. So there's two very different things. If you were going to buy something, for a rental, you would look at the numbers for a rental. If you were buying it for your personal home, you don't care about some things. You don't care about, cap rates and the 1% rule and this, that, and the other. So there's differences in the way you buy a property for sure. And if you're going to be someplace for 3 years, it probably doesn't make sense because the appreciation isn't going to get you there. Not in 3 years, typically.
No.
So especially when you're talking about a down payment. Now they have, the military has VA loans that they can use, but if they've already had a VA loan on another property somewhere, they can't use it on the next one. So unless they've sold it. So there's all sorts of different things. I mean, and really to get back, the two numbers that I was going to look up, and when you talk about the average American for an individual income is $31,000 and 99. Well, 31,099. So
Okay.
basically $31,100 and that was in 2018 or 2016. The average household made $56,516. That was in 2016. So $56,000 in most parts of the United States, you're scraping by. You're scraping by. And that's the reality of the situation is that, what's changed, the average income in 1970, average income in 1970 was $9,870, almost 10 grand for a household. But you know how much a house cost? About 10 grand.
Yeah.
That's how much a house costs, about 10 grand. So can you imagine if we were buying houses at $56,000?
That'd be great, wouldn't it?
And my point is, so the inflation and what's expensive is now it's completely changed. So if it would all be in line as far as your expendable income if we could buy a house for 10 grand. Okay, but we have to save, I believe I looked up the average numbers in 1970. The average house was $23,600. So I was wrong. So it's almost double your annual salary. Today, your average home in America, $398,000. So I would have to save for 6 years today and not spend any money to get close to buying a house, the average income. Compared to 1970, I would have to save for 2. So 4 more years. So that's a huge difference. And the American dream, that, even Jared James referenced, it's dead. I mean, it's not, you can't come out of high school. You can't come out of high school and go get a job on the factory line and, make $10 an hour or $12 an hour and work yourself up to a foreman at $15 and go do that. That doesn't exist anymore. So what our parents did and what our grandparents did is a totally different world. Even the education factor.
And years ago, you came out of college with a degree, and that you were ahead of a lot of people because not everybody was going to college. So that gave you a leg up. Now everybody goes to college because, quote unquote, that's the American dream. Yet now you're going to compete for a job that everybody's on the same level for. So the workforce is overloaded with, quote unquote, the American dream right now.
Well, they're overloaded with qualified people. And if you're watching the video of this, I'm using air quotes. So qualified people is kind of a joke to me because when you come out of college, you still have to relearn everything that you do. Okay, if I would have came out of college and sold real estate, it was my first gig, I would have not learned anything for probably 2 years. It would have taken me 2 years to get up to speed to learn how to sell real estate, how to work on property management, how to do that stuff. That's not a thing. Like you come out of college with a marketing degree. And no offense to my college professors or my college, it's not their job. I mean, they've the colleges and universities in America have been doing the same thing that they've been doing for years. Is hey, we're going to give you a bunch of base information and we're going to go. Like, I would have been better off at 18 years old if I'd have came out of high school and started working for a real estate broker who was flipping and selling houses and learned that market. I'd have been a heck of a lot farther along. And to where, maybe 18 years old, we all don't know what the heck we want to do coming out of school. But at the same time, it's about, there's nothing in college outside of maybe being a doctor. And I don't even know this for sure. And I would say that, doctors still call it a practice, because things change all the time. So there's nothing in college that you really come out of college and you go do the exact same thing that you learned how to do in college. That just doesn't exist.
Unless you're going to a specific trade school. And again, to that point, if I
go to a welding school and come out and get a job with a welder that, owned the university or started the university for their own benefit, which happens all the time. And Ford owns a welding school in Michigan that their welders come out of. Like they just hire out of there. Like it's just a feed right into Ford. But here's the thing about that now. You don't even have a welder because you're hiring a freaking robot to do it.
Yeah.
So the welder that you learned how to do that is now an IT guy that learned how to set up algorithms on a robot. So it's not the same thing. And not everybody can be an IT guy and set up algorithms and understand that stuff. So it's a different world that we live in. And unfortunately, we haven't changed our thinking yet as to do we go to school or go to college? Because I got news for you. When I do have a kid, or if I have a kid, I'm going to have a hard conversation saying, does he go to a traditional 4-year university or does he go to work for somebody with what he wants to do? I'm not sure that as a, especially in 24 years more of our economy, where we're going to be is a college degree. Cause I think there's way too many kids that have college degrees nowadays that come out with a worthless degree. Everybody's got a degree, blah, 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 blah. But yet I can't find a freaking contractor to change my toilet. Yeah. And there's no shame in that freaking work, man. Some of the plumbers and contractors that I know they're getting paid really well, guys.
It's great.
Like, I have thought about, like, if I had the skills, like just saying screw it and being like, you know what, I'll do plumbing for a living. I don't really
property
care.
management was good, but
yeah, this plumbing. I mean,
that's really appealing.
It's a great idea.
Let's.
I went on a rant there. So
I was gonna say I'm gonna cut you off here. We had talked about some numbers earlier, getting back to our net worth of, again, a homeowner versus a renter, and we wanted to take up an average home in our Jacksonville market. We had kind of said, you and I both this past year had purchased a property right around that $230,000 mark. So at that $230,000 mark, you're gonna pay. And we, again, something around that 3.5% down. So you're going to put about, call it $10,000 down, and you're going to mortgage about $220,000 at 4.5%. Your monthly payment is going to be about $1,548.04. And I say about, that's exactly what it is, or at least what I ran through my little calculator. And that's covering your taxes, principal, interest, mortgage, insurance, things like that. That said, if we're going to do that over a 30-year span, every month you're going to pay that $1,548 for 30 years. At the end of those 30 years, you would have paid $533,644 for your house that we bought for $230,000.
Yep.
And again, assuming that you got about $100,000 worth of maintenance improvements over that time, that number is going to jump to $633,644. So, all things being equal, if you're a renter in that same situation, you're renting a property for $1,548 over the 30 years, maybe you're going to save on the down payment, save on the maintenance, but you're going to still spend that $540,000. So comparing apples to apples, quick math here is somewhere in the, $97,000 range, $97,500. Or 96.5, I guess is what it would be. Approximately what you would have saved over a 30-year period. But as a renter, at the end of those 30 years, you've got $0. And assuming there's value in your property, if nothing changes and the property's worth the same, you've got about that $230,000 worth of equity now.
And real estate's the only place that over the course of 100 years we've seen growth. So even at a 0.5% growth, I think we estimated it at or what did we 1%, didn't we?
Yeah, I think we did 1%.
Yeah. 1% growth per year over the course of 30 years. And we've seen appreciation go well beyond that in the last few years. Obviously in America, we've also seen it go the opposite way. So while there's some risk involved, more often than not, we're seeing appreciation in real estate. Obviously, comparing the numbers that we referenced earlier from 1970 to 2017, your average house was $23,000, and your average house in 2017 was $398. So, what would tell you is that over time, that appreciation is typically going to happen. Obviously, throughout the Great Depression, throughout, what are we calling 2009? Do we have a name for that? Typically, the .com boom. What are we going to call that thing? The Big Short. I don't know.
The Big Short. There you go.
The Big Short, whatever.
Someone made off out of that.
Someone made money. Regardless, Assuming that you had 1% appreciation, you were basically going to sell that property for about 290. Let's take out, taxes and fees, real estate commissions, whatever for selling the property. You were at about 275.
And there goes in right into your average net worth again of a homeowner versus a renter. So at the end of that 30-year period, again, as a renter, you've got zero. As a homeowner, you've got about 275,000. So this is, again, where their argument comes in. That forced savings, are you going to necessarily have invested or forced yourself to invest that 275 or that 540 elsewhere? Because realistically,
history shows that you will not.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, you need to live somewhere. So the flip side of that argument is you're paying somebody's mortgage. You're paying somebody's equity. Why not pay your own?
Well, and that's the way a lot of
the average person out there. You're Gary Vee or Grant Cardone is going to say, don't go live in a $2,000 a month rental. Go rent out a place for $1,000 and save the extra, $548, and invest that. But at the end of the day, again, who's going to be disciplined enough? Your average person is probably not disciplined enough to live significantly below their means and then force save hundreds of dollars a month and then make smart investment decisions on top of that in order to get them well above where they would be just buying a property and, again, investing in home ownership throughout the years.
The other side of that is assuming that you're making good investments too.
Yes. Exactly.
Assuming that the market, whatever you're investing in, whether it be stocks, bonds, real estate, assuming that those are all appreciating as well, and you're making the right investments. So there's some skill level involved in that and knowing what you're doing, obviously.
Touching back on your
stocking it back in the bank,
having kids one day, part of homeownership is giving, again, your child a secure place to call home. It's, creating community within neighborhoods, within school districts, things like that. So again, those are all things where if you're a renter and you're moving from one place to another, again, child isn't necessarily going to have that secure home for X amount of years growing up, or again, creating community in general, if it's just transient renters coming in and out every few years.
Yep. And as a renter, I mean, what happens when, there's added costs when you have to move, every 3 years because the owner wants to sell it, or, you're a bad tenant, or you don't keep it clean enough, or they're going to raise the rent. You don't want to do that. So there's some security in saying, hey, you know what? The highest that my mortgage is going to be for the next 30 years, if I truly want it to be, and my job stays in the same place and I have the income, the highest that my mortgage is going to be is X. Okay, allows yourself to budget pretty well, because that's like, you go into an older neighborhood and an older lady's been there, and older lady and her husband or whatever, they're in their 70s, but they bought that thing 40 years ago and they've been living there forever. Their mortgage payment originally, even when it was paid off, was only like $400 a month, and now properties are selling around them for, $400,000, and they bought this thing for, $75,000 back in 1970. Like, that's a huge thing for them. There's a lot of money to be made for them. They're going to make, $400,000 or $500,000. It's $500,000 to them to retire on. Or if they have to, I have this situation a lot. I have owners who come in and they have rental property or property that were their moms or their dads, and they say, hey, well, I thought about selling it. The problem is if I sell it, I got to pay a ridiculous amount of taxes. If I rent this property and it's my mom and dad's name, and I basically set up a trust to funnel all the rental money back through there, you can skate the tax game a little bit. So it's going through a trust, it's getting directly to them, and now all of a sudden that retiree who's in assisted living or whatever, they're having an extra $2,000 in income for the rest of their life, pay for their assisted living, their retirement home, whatever it is. So having a paid off asset gives you a ton more opportunity than not having anything. And assuming that the average person doesn't invest well or do what they need to do, you have more options when you have assets. Okay. So liquid assets are great. But a house that's paid off with no mortgage is a pretty liquid asset. So
it's pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, you can do a lot of things with it. Whether it be rental or sell it or take the big money and whatever. And I just think that, again, we're talking to the average person because that's who we deal with every day. These guys are talking to the average millionaire, which, by the way, is not average.
They take the influencer aspect of it, and again, they're selling the wannabes. I say the wannabes, the hopefuls, I should say, more than a wannabe. But again, I'm going to listen to them, and we learn a lot from what they have to say as well. But again, the average person listening can't do what they're suggesting that they do.
Honest
that's
question.
Pretty much what it comes down to.
How much do you actually listen to Gary Vee and Grant Cardone and some of those guys offering some of this?
I listen to them, I would say, occasionally, on the sense of a few times a month. But like anything else, it's about breaking down the facts. If you choose to take what anybody says as it is and as what they're saying and don't run off, and again, we're going to put the numbers to paper and either prove or disprove that. Now, they're not necessarily wrong in everything they're saying.
They're not. They're not wrong. It's just they're appealing to.
They'll have the mindset of a rich person. They've got a rich person's perspective. So
for sure,
they're not wrong in that regard. If we had tens of millions or hundreds of millions, that probably is the best thing to do. It probably is smarter to rent, so on and so forth. But to say that your average person should not buy a home and should continue to rent and then invest elsewhere is probably not the right thing. And
to me, that's ill-advised. And the problem that I have with that is, they advertise everywhere, right? You see Gary Vee stuff all over the place. You see Cardone all over the place. The average person will never do it. The average person is not disciplined enough to do what they do or what they have done. Okay. The average person can't do that. And the problem is they're spinning it off like, hey, you know what? You just follow what we say. You're going to be a freaking millionaire.
Yeah.
And it's just not to say it's BS because we're the No BS podcast, but it is kind of BS. I mean, it's not, it's almost deceiving people in my opinion. And again, I'm not, not that either of these two guys that we're talking about give a shit about my opinion, but at the same time, I'm dealing with regular people every day. And if you want my opinion about what a regular person should do, I'll tell you, it's probably better off for you to buy a house. Not Absolutely. All situations are better for you to buy a house. Like I said, there's always extenuating circumstances that may change your ability to want, able, and, I guess your motives to buy a house, I guess, if you will. Those can always be changed. Like I said, whether it's job, location, I'm only going to be here for a few years. I don't like where my buying power is at right now. I want to make more money in my personal life before I do it. There's all sorts of things to do it. So again, I like I said, we've kind of hit it on the head, I think, and really talked about the average person and what's best for them. So, I don't have anything more to go over per se on it.
No, I was going to say, I think we covered all the points that, I think we were looking at. I think made a good argument in the sense of the reason behind, again, the average person investing in a home for themselves and their family versus renting and kind of chasing that dream. So, yeah.
And like I said, it's not for everyone and everyone's going to have an opinion on it. But if you want a couple regular dudes' opinion on it, it's probably buy a house in most cases.
And at the end of the day, it comes down to the numbers. Run the numbers, and don't take just because they say, hey, you can invest this much and make X amount. Well, see what you can do. And again, as we said, put the numbers on paper and actually do them out and see what it turns out to in the end.
Absolutely.
So,
you got anything else, my man?
I think that wraps it up for this.
We promise we'll be better. We promise we'll be better on doing more and more podcasts here soon, right?
Yeah, we're gonna bring more.
I'm gonna block it off. We're gonna do Tuesday mornings right after our other call.
Yeah, and I'm gonna wake up earlier. I'm gonna go to bed earlier and wake up earlier to make that.
You'll get more done, by the way. It's amazing.
I get a lot done late at night.
See, I can't do that. Late at night, by the time I'm done, I'm out.
See, to me, I've got too many distractions during the day.
I'll wake up at 6:30 and I'll be in my office at 7:15, and I'll start doing that first hour of the day. If I can do all the crap that I didn't want to do last night and just get it out of the way, then I feel much better about my day.
That's probably very similar on the flip side of mine. So, hey, late at night, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, there's nobody up, nothing to do. I'll sit down.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I just do mine in the morning versus in the evening. Yeah. So perfect. Well, hey man, I appreciate the conversation as always. And if anybody has any questions about this stuff, where do they reach you at?
Ryan.robbins@era.com. You can also check out jackspropertypros.com. Starting to put some more content on there, some off-market properties, some listings that currently have. You can hit me up on that site at ryan@jackspropertypros.com. That's the email there. Other than that, 904.
We just need one email. We don't need one. We don't need multiple emails.
Ooh, I've got a Gmail.
All right. Moving on from Ryan, you can reach him somewhere. If you want to reach me, it's Matty at mattysells.com. So it's Matty at mattysells.com. Phone number is 904-574-1958. Give me a call if we get any questions. So other than that, man, appreciate you joining us, and we will talk at you soon. We'll by the way, I don't have the outro, so we're just gonna go blank.
We're going out.
We're going out. I have a little bit, but
we have some music.
I got a little bit of music. So that's it. All right, see you later.
We'll catch you. Thanks for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, there's a few things I'd like you to do. Subscribe, leave a review, and head over to nobsrealestatepodcast.com, where you can connect with Matt and I on all of the platforms we're on. Also, if you could do us a favor, leave a message letting us know what you enjoyed about the episode and what you'd like to hear about going forward.